All right, welcome to the channel. I was asked by several individuals to react to this video of what's the guy's name, Bart K with Peter Rogers. I have had Peter Rogers on my channel 3 or 4 times, somewhere in that range. So let's get started with this. I don't know anything about Bart K, so this is just me new getting into this territory. It seems like he's like a keto person, maybe.
Well, boys and girls, thanks for joining me once again for what could turn out to be a marathon. I really don't know. This is little Petey's latest efforts. This is a little video which is entitled Bart K Judgment Day. So I presume it's got something to do with me in some way. So let's have a look at it, shall we? And we'll correct little Petey where little Petey makes his little Petey poops. Mistakes, boo-boos, things like that. All right, little Petey, let's hear all about.
Now, I'd like to point out here that they're both bald, no hair, and skinny. So the arguments seem, are they going to be relevant?
How I'm wrong somehow, probably.
In the beginning, God said, "Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit. It shall be food for you." Genesis 1:29. Man.
Right, so you're going to start the premise of your argument around the needs physiologically for human beings in terms of their nutrition and stuff on a piece of canon, a piece of doctrine in a religious manuscript.
Opposed to a paid off piece of paper by a scientific study that is going to change in, like, I don't know, a month based on who's paying for the next one.
Okay.
It's weird how society used to kind of go based on this canon manuscript or whatever. But the diet part, I go to church, I'm Catholic or Christian or whatever, or Jewish. But what they said in the beginning about diet, wrong.
I'm intrigued.
Was designed to eat plant foods.
Oh, so you just added that last bit there because I don't see that in the scripture
The scientific study added it.
at all, Peter. That's your opinion.
Can we read? Can we not read? All right, so behold, I have given, I can't fucking see it from here. I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit, it shall be your food. What that says. So, yeah, got everything there, buddy.
And it's already been shown to be inane in the extreme. People that want to watch a discussion between myself and Peter that happened not long ago, you can watch that and, tune into the part where Peter says it's impossible that we could possibly conceivably be carnivores because, you see, we don't have sharp, pointy teeth like this. And other such intellectually flabbergasting statements.
Do we see any carnivores in nature that don't have that? Or small intestinal tract?
And we're starting well on this one already, aren't we, Petey? Have you got some science for us?
At the sermon.
Did he just? He did. He just vomited out the words tonight. Oh, this is the most annoying part of this, because I just did a video the other day about Harvard proved that red meat is 62% more likely to cause diabetes than not eating. And then everybody who saw this study that had been conducted for 75 years said, well, this isn't real science. So the science, when it's relevant to them, and I mean, we all do the same, is useful. But when it's not relevant to them, they got the blinders on, or oh, it's just anecdotal. Well, it's not real. Oh, well, this person was lying. You know,
On the Mount,
No, still in the theology. Okay.
God said, amongst other things, according to the gospel, Matthew 25:40, whatsoever you do to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me.
Yes. Let's see what you think the relevance of that is, though.
Indicating that you shall be judged for those things. And today is Bart K. Judgment Day.
Excellent. The rapture. I've been waiting. Good. Do I get a final speech? An acceptance speech? Or something? Or is it straight into the fiery pit? Let's hear. What's the judgment?
that's weird.
Looks like you got some splaining to do.
You got some planning to do, Lucy.
Okay, for Judgment Day. Here's a close-up, by the way.
Here's an even closer up.
Where are we getting with?
Ever.
And we're going to talk about what is known about the relationship of paleo, keto, carnivore, low-carb diet versus vegetarian.
What is known, you say? That's an...
If you don't know who I am, if you haven't watched my channel, I'm not just coming from this as like I haven't done this before. I did keto / carnivore for 10 years. 10. And my decline in health was pretty significant.
Interesting discussion. Good. Okay. So that's going to be your first failure straight away there, Peter, isn't it? You're going to talk about what you think is known, which shows us immediately that you do not understand science at all.
Nobody does. Nobody does. It's a paycheck for somebody. Here's some money. I got to sell this product. Here's some money. I got to sell this product. Get this result. It's just kind of like the toothpaste. Like I don't really watch TV anymore, but when I used to watch TV, they'd say like 9 out of 10 dentists approve this toothpaste. But the reality is they just asked enough dentists until they could say that 9 out of 10. I mean, this whole thing is just, it's just money making.
Cool. And have no actual place at the table for this discussion. And as such, when you go off rampantly off course on some childlike wild goose chase that will
kind of like he's doing right now,
not have any impact on the unassailability of my scientific position, we're not going to sit here and listen to it without interrupting it and saying, no, this is not going to work, Peter, this direction you're going, and here is why. Just as valid. Right. Go on, though.
Vegetarian vegan diets for general health, all-cause mortality, as well as for diabetes and cancer.
Uh-huh. We covered this a little bit in the discussion / debate that we had as well, Peter, and I showed you to be completely incompetent in any way, shape or form to actually interpret the pseudoscience known as the epidemiological data set.
No, this is where they go. This is where they go with this. Oh, man, it's amazing. They all use the same exact phrases. It's like they're all paid by the same person. It's kind of weird. They all use the same... Oh, well, it wasn't real. They're scientists, but they're not real scientists.
I showed you up. Remember, I ran rings around you in a discussion about that very topic and took you to a place that you had no idea even existed, or you know how to even calculate any of this stuff on the fly quickly. And yet I'm the one who doesn't know much
Get to the fucking point here, dude.
about this, and
8 minutes into this about yep.
being shown up in some way. This is hilarious. Let's go through it again, though, if we have to.
Okay, so first of all, the most useful thing I ever learned after, being a doctor for over 30
Was it vocal control, Peter? Was it
Why don't you practice that?
modulation of your voice, you're about to say?
years is that if humans eat a primarily starch-based diet, a plant-based diet with mostly starch to satisfy their hunger, they end up being healthy. And that's...
Well, that's a sweeping generalization, and also health is a construct. Science is an empirical undertaking using...
That's why Duke University built an entire basically wing or and hospital around Dr. Walter Kempner because his program had a 98 to 99% success rate using rice, sugar, fruit, and fruit juice. That's why Dr. McDougall has such a success rate. That's why True North has such a success rate. I mean, where's this guy going with?
Variables as measured. Because there's also quite a population of people who do not eat a diet remotely like the one you've just described, who also seem to be pretty healthy.
The ones in the hospitals? The ones on pills? Who are we talking about here?
So,
Looked like he was about to take a dump.
Pois, really, Peter.
That's more useful than anything I ever learned in pre-med, med school, residency, fellowship, and attending work. And the reason is because your gut is stretched. That's early satisfaction of hunger. Starch is basically a polymer of glucose wrapped in fiber from a plant food.
It's not necessarily wrapped in fiber.
And starch is basically P for potato, SP, sweet potato, rice, beans, peas, lentils, garbanzos.
How does all of this extraneous 101 level basic introduction to material affect the veracity, correctness of anything I had to say in our discussion the other day, Peter, or the fact that you were given it no lube? Because I don't think any of this does affect that.
All right, I gotta go watch this interview. I'll be right back.
All right, Charles, thank you for joining us once again. Where today my very special guest is Dr. Peter Rogers. Peter is an MD in the States, as I understand it, and also a proponent of the vegan ideology. Is that right, Peter? Both of those things?
I would say the vegan diet, no ideology.
Oh, no ideology. So you're going to tell us about the? Are you going to tell us about?
I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of those animal rights people. The same people who promote animal rights are the ones that are against human rights, has been my experience. So I'm not a fan of that.
Cool bananas. All right, so
ironically, he uses bananas.
What precipitated this discussion today was that one of my supporters suggested to me that you're the sort of bloke who's prepared to talk to folks, unlike most of your, shall we say, vegan so-called colleagues, shall we say, who none of whom actually have the stones, as it were, to sit down in front of me for various reasons on a cerebral style discussion. So my hat is off to you immediately, Peter, and you're very, very welcome.
On to it, man. This guy likes to talk about
my favorite bugbears, epodiddly doodly moodlymology. We'll get to that as and when we get to it. But in the meantime, why don't you kick us off? Give us
electron transport to learn about diabetes to save his own life. And when he writes the paper, he especially emphasizes there's a couple different ways.
Give us your best description, I guess, of when someone says they have type 2 diabetes.
Diabetes.
What is that? What is the actual pathology? What is it that actually needs to be intervened? What is the dangerous factor?
Well, there's a couple different ways to look at diabetes. And there's a great paper. It was written by Michael Brownlee in 2004. He won the Banting Award, Best Diabetes Researcher in the World. The name of the paper is called The Unifying Theory of Diabetic Complications. If anybody wants to read it, they can get the paper at ADA.org, American Diabetic Association.org. If you go to PubMed, you'll just get no abstract available. You won't even be able to see anything. And his research, the guy was a type 1 diabetic himself, so he was trying to learn about diabetes to save his own life. And when he writes the paper, he especially emphasizes what would be called the concept of overnutrition. If you overwhelm the mitochondria, the inner mitochondrial membrane, electron transport, you can get that mitochondria to fail. He says he thinks what's happening is it's overwhelmed with electron carriers. It pumps protons too quickly into the intermembranous space between the outer and the inner mitochondrial membrane, and that causes a back pressure, if you will, that gradient, such that electron transport reverses direction on the inner mitochondrial membrane. And I typically think of that as initially primarily occurring in skeletal muscle due to accumulation of intramyocellular fat. But he also makes the point it's not just intramyocellular fat. He says if you look at other cells like endothelial cells,
they are not insulin dependent for their uptake of glucose. They just take up glucose in proportion to the blood glucose level. And he says when you have a chronically elevated blood glucose, hyperglycemia, your endothelial cells will take in too much glucose, and that elevated glucose within the cell will also cause this phenomenon of overnutrition. And when he says overnutrition, what we're referring to here is that it sends a signal to the enzymes in the cytoplasm to not allow any more glucose into the cell. And so if you're talking about skeletal muscle, you'll inhibit the glucose type 4 transporters from releasing their glucose transporters up to the plasma membrane. Normally you have them stored in cytoplasm vesicles. They merge with the plasma membrane, let's say in a skeletal muscle, and then the glucose type 4 transporters allow the glucose into the cell. But in an endothelial cell, for example, the glucose just keeps coming in. And so you get damage to the endothelium in the setting of hyperglycemia. And that, like I said, that's the universal term sometimes referred for this purpose is overnutrition.
Okay. So you seem to be alluding there, Peter, without actually necessarily explicitly saying that.
This guy. This guy uses like just terms, just to use terms, just to look like he's smarter than he is. Like there's a cause and effect. Does it really matter how it happens, or does it matter how you get rid of it? Dr. Walter Kempner got rid of it with sugar, rice, fruit, and fruit juice. Dr. John McDougall gets rid of it with starches. Doug Graham gets rid of it with fruit.
Type 2 diabetes.
Diabetes
is chronically elevated blood glucose and nothing else. That's what it is. That is how it is diagnosed. That is the pathology, elevated blood glucose, and it's that needs to be ameliorated. Yes?
Well, kind of, but not exactly, because there's different ways to look at it. One can consider the elevated blood glucose. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It is how one diagnoses the disease. It is how it is officially defined. It is how it is staged and mapped. That is all true. But there's also the case of something that comes before the hyperglycemia, and that's the insulin resistance that I just referred to, sometimes also called overnutrition.
Right. Okay. So that's what you mean by overnutrition. You mean insulin resistance. Okay. How would you respond, Peter, if I proposed to you that insulin resistance is a construct?
Well, it is the case that, there's another researcher named Shulman, and when they infuse by IV lipids into the blood, they will cause insulin resistance, and they don't get as much of that type of an effect by infusing carbohydrate into the veins. And so it appears that the skeletal muscle, being glucose type 4 transporter dependent for uptake of glucose, is especially sensitive to excessive lipids in the blood.
Okay. How do you mean excessive lipids in the blood there, Peter?
Well, especially saturated fat, but fat in general.
And then here we go with, Georgy Dinkov proving that saturated fat was better than poly and mono. So I don't know.
Health failures. I've become healthier and healthier the more plant-based I've gone, and I've seen that in a lot of people. But just the
at least 3.8 billion years of positive and have a significant mix of both carbohydrates and fats trying to enter the mitochondria for oxidative.
But not exactly, because there's different ways to look at it. One can consider the elevated blood glucose. Yes, you are absolutely correct. It is how one diagnoses the disease. It is how it is officially defined. It is how it is staged and mapped. That is all true. But there's also the case of something that comes before the hyperglycemia, and that's the insulin resistance that I just referred to, sometimes also called overnutrition.
Right. Okay. So that's what you mean by overnutrition. You mean insulin resistance. Okay. How would you respond, Peter, if I proposed to you that insulin resistance is a construct?
Transport, I'm referring, of course, to the inner mitochondrial membrane.
Yes.
And it'll typically have a gradient, around negative 160 millivolts, which is an incredibly high gradient. It's the highest electrical gradient across a membrane that I'm aware of in the human body.
Okay, that's also a construct though, Peter, isn't it? Because in actual fact, on either side of the membrane, the sum total of all the electrochemical charges is zero on both sides. Ergo, the voltage across that membrane is zero. What we're talking about is a species-specific concentration gradient of various chemicals. In this case, we're talking about the antagonistic effects of fat entering a mitochondria versus carbohydrate entering a mitochondria, or attempting to do so, at ostensibly the same or similar points around the acetyl coenzyme A entry point, yeah? I.e.,
Well,
the Randall cycle is in effect if you have a significant mix of both carbohydrates and fats trying to enter the mitochondria for oxidative process, yeah?
well, I haven't reviewed the Randall cycle in a while, so I'm not familiar with it. Just, you know,
Well, first of all, it shouldn't be called a cycle because it's not one. The bloke that proposed it, Sir Philip Randall, called it a cycle for some reason. He called it the glycerol fatty acid cycle, which doesn't make any sense either, really, because it's really nothing to do with that either. And then later it was named after him, the Randall cycle, despite the fact that it's not one. Ostensibly, you have outlined accurately the net effects of carbohydrate and fat both trying to enter the mitochondria at the same time.
You know what?
That being the blockade of the GLUT4.
I can't do it. This guy is just, yep. I can't do it. Anyway, I'll link these videos down below. If you can handle going through this guy just puking out terms, trying to sound smart, go for it. I'm more cause and effect. I don't need to watch some paid actors. I don't need to watch some paid off science. I don't need to watch any of this stuff. I saw myself go from over 400 pounds to under 2 or under 3, you know, like 250-ish. Doing what I did. I don't need to go through this. This is just too much. I mean, I'm passing out over here. Anyways, hopefully you liked the video. Comments, questions down below. I'm sure they're going to be interesting. Like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you in the next one. You know, share this stuff if you think it'll help somebody. I don't know about this one, though. Anyway, peace.